Justin Martyr, Teaching on the Soul and Resurrection. Justin Martyr, one of the early Christian apologists, strongly emphasized the doctrine of the resurrection of the dead, a belief that he considered essential to true Christianity. In his dialogue with Trypho, a conversation with a Jewish philosopher, Justin explains his view on the resurrection and refutes various heresies that denied this fundamental truth. His teachings offer insight into the early Christian understanding of the soul and the resurrection, which differ from modern interpretations influenced by Greek philosophy. Full quotation from Justin Martyr. In chapter 80 of Dialogue with Trypho, Justin Martyr articulates his stance on the resurrection of the dead and the nature of true Christian belief. Then I answered, "I am not so miserable a fellow, Trypho, as to say one thing and think another. I admitted to you formerly that I and many others are of this opinion, and believe that such will take place, as you assuredly are aware. But, on the other hand, I signified to you that many who belong to the pure and pious faith, and are true Christians, think otherwise. Moreover, I pointed out to you that some who are called Christians, but are godless, impious heretics, teach doctrines that are in every way blasphemous, atheistical, and foolish. But that you may know that I do not say this before you alone, I shall draw up a statement, so far as I can, of all the arguments which have passed between us, in which I shall record myself as admitting the very same things which I admit to you. For I choose to follow not men or men's doctrines, but God and the doctrines delivered by him. For if you have fallen in with some who are called Christians, but who do not admit this truth, and venture to blaspheme the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, who say there is no resurrection of the dead, and that their souls, when they die, are taken to heaven, do not imagine that they are Christians, even as one, if he would rightly consider it, would not admit that the Sadducees or similar sects of Genist, Meristae, Gelilaeans, Hellenists, Pharisees, Baptists are Jews. Do not hear me impatiently when I tell you what I think, but are only called Jews and children of Abraham, worshiping God with the lips, as God himself declared, but the heart was far from him. But I and others who are right-minded Christians on all points are assured that there will be a resurrection of the dead, and 1,000 years in Jerusalem, which will then be built, adorned, and enlarged. The prophets Ezekiel and Isaiah and others declare. Justin Martyr, Dialogue with Trypho, chapter 80. In this passage, Justin Martyr refutes the belief of some heretics who denied the resurrection of the dead and the corporeal nature of salvation. He highlights that true Christians, in contrast to these heretics, believe in the resurrection and an eventual physical restoration of Jerusalem, a doctrine grounded in the Old Testament prophecies. The soul in early church teaching. Justin Martyr's view of the soul is deeply connected to his teachings on the resurrection. He does not subscribe to the Greek philosophical idea of the immortality of the soul, which was heavily influenced by figures like Plato. For Justin, the soul is not inherently immortal. It is rather subject to the resurrection, which is a future event where the body and soul are reunited in a glorified state. In his writings, Justin consistently defends the resurrection of the body, opposing any notion that the soul goes to heaven immediately upon death, a belief that was gaining traction in certain circles of early Christian thought. The early Christian doctrine of resurrection, as taught by Justin, centers on the idea that life after death involves a physical bodily resurrection. This belief is distinct from the Greek understanding of the soul's immortality, which posits that the soul is eternal and indestructible by nature. Instead, Justin affirms that both body and soul will be resurrected and glorified by God in the age to come. This understanding is a rejection of the notion that the soul is inherently separate from the body, or that it could exist independently in an afterlife. Biblical teachings on the resurrection of the dead. Justin Martyr's teachings align with several key biblical passages that emphasize the resurrection of the dead as a central hope for Christians. Here are a few significant Bible quotes that highlight this theme. 1. John 5, verse 28 to 29. Do not marvel at this, for the hour is coming in which all who are in the graves will hear his voice and come forth, those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have done evil to the resurrection of condemnation. This passage speaks directly to the resurrection of the dead, affirming that all will be resurrected, both the righteous and the wicked. 2. 1 Corinthians 15:42-44. So also is the resurrection of the dead. The body is sown in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. This passage from Paul's letter to the Corinthians explains the transformation of the body in the resurrection, showing that while the physical body is corrupted and weak, it will be raised in incorruption and power. Revelation 20:12-13. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books. The sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Hades delivered up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one according to his works. This passage from the book of Revelation emphasizes that all the dead will be resurrected and judged according to their deeds. The immortality of the soul, Greek influence. It is important to note that the idea of the immortality of the soul, often associated with Christian doctrine today, is not explicitly taught in the Jewish Christian scriptures. This concept, largely derived from Greek philosophy, especially the teachings of Plato, holds that the soul is inherently immortal and exists apart from the body after death. In contrast, early Christian teachings, as exemplified by Justin Martyr, focused on the resurrection of the body and the ultimate restoration of all things in the age to come. Justin's rejection of the immortality of the soul idea emphasizes his belief that true Christian doctrine is based on the resurrection, not an immediate, separate afterlife for the soul. Conclusion. Justin Martyr's teachings on the soul and resurrection highlight the early Christian emphasis on the bodily resurrection, a belief that aligns closely with the Hebrew scriptures and the teachings of Jesus. His refutation of the immortality of the soul and the notion of an immediate transition to heaven after death reflects a distinctive Christian worldview that holds resurrection as the core of salvation. This stands in contrast to later Greek-influenced theological ideas, emphasizing that true Christian hope lies in the resurrection of the body, where both soul and body will be perfected in the life to come.